Hello,
Hello.
Ruby. It's an
Hi.
absolute delight to talk to you again.
And you too.
Thank you for being here with us for Nudgestock 2021. It's taken me 5 years to get you on the bill, but we did it. And I suppose I want to kick off by asking what your journey was, how you came to be studying neuroscience, to do a master's in a mindfulness-based cognitive therapy at Oxford, no less. But what was the journey that took you there?
Well, how far back do you want me to go? I'll speed it up. So
childhood. Let's start in childhood.
Childhood, yeah. I was born in Evanston, Illinois. Then later I was a fantastic canoeist, became a waitress. I won't go that far back. Anyway, I came to these shores, to the UK about, I don't know, maybe 20 years, more than 20 years ago. My parents were refugees, so they spent their whole childhood trying to get out of Vienna, and I spent my whole childhood trying to get back into Europe to get away from them. But that's another story. So what did I do first? Oh, I finally got into drama school. Nobody would take me because primarily I wasn't very talented. So I did go to drama school, and because I have the drive of a Rottweiler, which is really good for career, but bad for mental health, because we can crash and burn. I did get into the Royal Shakespeare Company, and Alan Rickman saw me. We actually had a house together and said, you know, you're really funny. You should write how you think. And because he said, you're not a very good actress. And a lot of people in the company agreed. I used to get little notes saying, find another career, but Alan made me do comedy. And he was my mentor for the until he died, 30 years, teaching me how to be funny without being desperate. Anyway, I got a job on TV. I eventually had a career for 25 years on the BBC, where they let me do anything I wanted for a while until reality shows kicked in, and then all the integrity left. So I left, and I was always interested in the brain. So I crashed course at UCL, University College London, in neuroscience, and all the kids were 21. So I told them I had that disease where you age really fast, and they believed me. And I started partying. Anyway, in the end, they liked me because I had the car. And then I was really fascinated with the mind and the brain, because when I was younger, you could only study a brain if it was in a corpse. That wasn't of any interest. But what happened was I was working in TV. Comic Relief took a picture of me and asked if they could use it for mental health charity to get money. And I thought they were going to just make it obscure, but they put huge posters of me up and down the tube station, giant posters of me that said 1 in 4 people have mental illness, 1 in 5 people have dandruff. I have both, without asking me. So I was mortified, and I thought, okay, I've got to, you didn't tell people you had mental illness, because good luck holding on to your job. So I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a show, and I'm going to pretend that's my publicity poster, and I'll be opening in the West End with it. So I wrote a show about mental illness, and I performed it in mental institutions to my people for 2 years. And I used to say that my reviews were from the bipolars. I laughed, I cried. I'd make all these jokes. But anyway, they laughed. And it was the happiest time of my life, because I didn't charge anything, but they let me stay overnight. And my happy place is mental institution. So what happened was I started this career, and then I wrote books, and eventually I was so interested in, I wanted to learn. I got a degree in psychotherapy, but I wasn't a good therapist. So I started to look into mindfulness, because you don't have to run to somebody and say, fix me. It's about self-regulation. So I was so curious, how does that work? So I hunted down one of the founders of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, Mark Williams, and he was at Oxford. And I drove to him and I said, just explain to me, you got about 1 minute? And it's very quick, just because I want to know, if I did this thing, what happens in the brain? Because I don't have, if I can't taste it or see it, I don't buy it. I got that from my dad. I have to know what exactly how does the brain change? And he said, oh, well, if you want to know that, you'd have to get into Oxford and get your master's. So I did. And nobody was as surprised as that man. And that changed my life, because that was science, and you have to walk the talk, and you can change your brain. There is neuroplasticity. It isn't wishful thinking. And so I've combined that with entertainment, and I did shows. John Kempton came to one, and friends. And I performed for the last 15 years, and it was always on combinations of neuroscience, the brain, evolution, how we are the way we are. And all the books are themes that I find really fascinating. And so I just flip it into comedy. And that's how I make a living.
And you've done some extraordinary work, which I think started with Marks and Spencer's, but is now online with the Frazzled Cafe. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, my 3 books back, it was called A Mindfulness Guide for the Frazzled, which was mindfulness exercises, and Mark Williams gave me his permission, but in my language, and much and more practical. So while shopping, while in the gym, but he allowed me to do it. I wasn't going far off piste, and obviously adding comedy. So frazzled is a neurobiological expression. I didn't make it up. It's fantastic expression, but it does mean stress about stress. This is a new contemporary illness we have. So we're giving ourselves a running commentary. I shouldn't be so depressed. No, nobody likes me. I'm not good enough. Why am I so? This dialogue is what sabotages our mind, so we can't think straight. So I wanted to always have a place where I could meet other people who were frazzled. That's not mental illness. I have that too. This isn't therapy, but I wanted something like what the Quakers had, or we used to have when we were sitting around the fire after a hard day's hunt, and we'd have each other's back, because in my line of work, so much of your time, life is hard enough, going to cocktail parties and having to ask people how their kids are when you don't give a shit, it tires me out. So I wanted to find a place where I could speak human. So I mentioned it to Marks and Spencer's, and this is 5 years ago, ran with it, paid for my staff, and gave me all the Marks and Spencer's cafes up and down the country. So groups of 15 would meet with a facilitator. It begins and ends with mindfulness, and it's got a format. It's not a free-for-all. And they would give free coffee and vistas. Then Zoom happened, and that's where we really took off. I did it every evening for about 100 people, and my hosts do smaller meetings during the day. And it's magnificent. It is I always say, I start with mindfulness from around the world, all ethnicities, all ages. When somebody speaks from the heart, you just see 100 heads going like this, going, yeah, that's me too. And they forget about that. This is an older person. This is a younger person. This is, a different, humans bond, and compassion is the glue. So I've been doing this. Now I do it 3 times a week. It's like going, I guess what church was. You just watch people, the relief on their faces when they can speak their truth, and they know not to go on too long because there's a lot of people, and we're not allowed to talk about the news. So I say, well, what's the weather condition going on in your mind now? People know what that means. They never go on and on. I don't have to wave a white flag, and they resonate with each other. They know not to give advice. We have a button that says need help now if you really are in a mental state. And then there's breakout rooms, and it's like we used to have, they bond completely. People are meeting each other. It's like, even though there's new people, but we have a core group, and we've been together a year, and it's remarkable. This is a space
I saw it in action
around the world, and nobody else has
it.
done it. So if anybody listening to this would like to get involved, please get in touch with Tara. And
please connect. Yeah, because it is a wonderful, when Rory and I both attended last week to see the Frazzled Cafe in action, and I think the response that we both had was, this is so necessary. And to see that people, we're all human, as you say, we all speak the same language really when we speak from the heart, but people need to be heard, and that their suffering, their pain needs to be heard.
Life is hard.
That makes it better.
And all the questions we have, we never get to ask. What do you do when you're lonely? We were lonely before COVID. Why'd we wait till now? What do
And
you
actually,
do
the
about
COVID thing is
cancer?
interesting because Rory and I had, when we were talking about this ahead of a time, we thought, well, it's no longer in the cafes. Maybe you don't have that same kind of bond experience. But actually, I think you said this to us. Being able to be on Zoom means that people who are really suffering, often the people I saw were in pain, but also the depressed who maybe can't get out of bed, can't get out of the house, this was opening up a new channel to them as well.
Well, again, if they're in the depth of depression, we advise them where to go. But people were highly anxious. I have depression. You couldn't be in the midst of it and be on this because you have to listen to other people. And when you're too ill, you can't, you can't, there's too much brain fog. But the very thing that used to distract us in real life is the computer, and now you're on it. And you can see the whites of people's eyes, and that's where empathy kicks in. So we're using it as a kind of training tool to say, when we're out of this is how you listen to people. And this is how you listen with compassion. And everybody's learned that, even if they've come for one meeting. And it's humans at their best. It's at their best. My next book, which comes out in August, is a mindfulness guide for survival, where I'm talking about what came up, the themes that we never addressed, the big realities of uncertainty, change, death, loneliness, dissatisfaction, difficult emotions. We weren't ready. The human race, we know how to make eye candy and order a husband at 2 a.m. off your computer, but how to emotionally take care of ourselves, we have no idea. I always used to say it's like we have a Ferrari on our heads, but nobody gave us the keys. So that's why I love mindfulness so much, because at least it's a tool. You're not just throwing up your hands and going, well, that's the way it is. You can't do that anymore.
I noticed in the cafe there were a number of people sort of nodding along when there were references to ADHD, and it seems that perhaps this is one of the malaise of our time. This sense that even if someone hadn't got a prognosis, or they'd been described in this way, that nonetheless there was this thought on thought and overwhelming sensation.
I wouldn't say, we're getting it confused with ADHD. We are overwhelmed. We are frazzled. We need to kind of address the issue. And I don't want to go on bitching about the internet and whose fault it is and kids are gay. That's not my area of expertise. It is what it is. Technology is here. It's not going anywhere. And it didn't land in our garden like a meteorite. We put it there. So the idea is use what's handy, or choose where your compassion goes. Otherwise, you'll burn out. We humans were built to do it on our own. So
worse in the time post of Corona. Is this?
They only faced it during Corona. It was always happening. But if you have enough things to be busy with and enough distractions, which is our addiction, and there's enough bad news being pounded at you, so your fear levels are now way, way over what we can take. You're sitting ducks for a disaster. Maybe not COVID, but you will have a heart attack, or the brain and the body are a onesie. They aren't different. They're connected. So when there's too much cortisol, you knock out your immune system. And then you're open season for all those diseases. They didn't happen by accident. Some do, and there is genetic thing, but a lot of it is fueled by how we think about things.
I think you say in the book, we didn't die of stress 500 years ago, and now it's
1,000 years ago. Nobody died of stress. It worked for us. It gives you your mojo. And if there's a predator behind you, you better have some stress, or some cortisol, otherwise you're lunch. But it always calmed down. That's when we all met around the fire. We calmed each other down. That's what community does. But with no community, it's a free for all.
It certainly felt like a modern church to be there at the.
Yeah,
it did.
What church should have done.
And I mean, other than obviously getting the Frazzled Cafe out there to the world, sharing that, what should the new normal look like post Corona? What if you were to be able to shape that?
I don't. I've all my books are about humans and how we have glitches. We were born flawed. So this thing about being perfect is an illness. we are victims of, somebody said, we are not our fault. Evolution, did the best it could. So it gave us things like stress or the sense of competition. It gave us envy. It gave us shame. We were born with these, but we used them. I mean, they made us step up to the plate if we were letting the tribe down. And competition, it made us tougher and tougher, but now we're competing with the world. So you're always going to have low self-esteem. Our brain doesn't have the bandwidth to take in so much. So now we have to make some boundaries for ourselves. How much can you take? That's sort of my thing. And, I wrote books. My last one was with the monk and the neuroscientist. How do we should know a little bit about how this mind works. Otherwise it'll hijack us every time. And people think, why are so many of my thoughts negative? Well, they are, Blanche. Out of 5, 4 are negative. And Rick Hansen says that our negative thoughts are Velcro, and our positive thoughts are more like Teflon. But anyway, you know what I mean. Negativity sticks to us because we needed it back hundreds of thousands of years ago. You had to be on your toes for, like any animal. If you had a big smiley face, you would have been eaten. You wouldn't be sitting here. So we have this proclivity, but on the other hand, we do have this higher brain, and we do have the ability to adjust some dials. We can't just say, oh, well, stuff happens. You won't suddenly turn into a glowing, happy, big smiley, because that's nauseating. But you will be able to say, okay, these are habits of thinking. I'm not necessarily those habits. So let's just swerve some of that negativity and question it.
And to be present, right? And yet that seems to be the greatest challenge, is just to live in the present rather than catastrophizing the future.
That's almost, it's difficult, but so is doing gymnastics. But if you go to the gym enough, you'll get over that. You'll get some distance if you pole vault. So the mind, you can push it toward that. I mean, if you do it gently and with kindness and with self-compassion, and also where you focus your attention defines who you are in any particular moment. So, for example, 2 years before COVID, I was as caught up in the news as everybody. It's like, bring out your dead. Just give me more death tolls. And we can't get our eyes off it. It's a car accident. So I thought, let's shift your attention. I'm not just talking about my books, but 2 years before COVID, the lockdown happened. I wrote a book called And Now for the Good News, To the Future with Love. And I went around the globe looking for where I call them the green shoots are of what might possibly make the future more hopeful. So I went and worked at the Patagonia Sportswear Company on the business chapter, and at Ben & Jerry's, and then went to schools in Finland and in the UK where they're teaching empathy. And I went to tech companies and communities where they're, now making intentional communities. And every chapter was about working as a team, called Team Human. And so I met the big players who are changing the world, but we need to switch our attention and be open to that. Otherwise, we'll just be addicted to the news and addicted to what we haven't got, but that advertisers say if we buy, we will be happy. So you have to see through all this. It's a jungle out there.
And what advice would you give to anyone today feeling a little frazzled?
Come to the meetings.
Come to the meeting.
People, you can't do this on your own. And do something nice. I mean, I used to feel when I was at Oxford, Mark Williams would talk about compassion. I said, I can't say that C word. It's too gooey. But that chemical, that oxytocin that switches on when you do something kind, is the antidote to cortisol. So even by doing one little act of kindness, you're already, forget about the other person, but you're fueling yourself with this chemical that actually does the opposite of what cortisol does. Your heartbeat comes down, your blood pressure comes down, the brain gets more energy. So all this stuff, I think if the public just learned a little bit, they don't have to be brain surgeons, but understand how this works, that you have an emergency button. It will go off if you surround yourself with fear, and know that don't give yourself a hard time. It's not your condition, it's human condition. we're built to pick up fear, but we also have a way to shut it down. So that's my thing.
To master our own minds. That seems to be the agenda of
what
the
else
age.
are you doing? You want to be happy. It's the only way you're going to do it. You can buy what you want, but it won't get you there.
No, and it seems like I mentioned to you the other day, I certainly feel that I've experienced some post-traumatic growth during this period of Corona, this reset of priorities. And I, would hope that society, that is something that we can embrace, the good that's actually come out of this.
I hope so. I hope it stays. But, we have a reptilian part of our brain that never went away, and it doesn't realize the wallpaper's changed. So we may go back to each man for himself, but I'd rather be around people that are like me now. So again, it's a choice. I might not, I might have to say no to a few people that I used to say yes to.
And I think that's it, isn't it? It's taking control a little of your own mind and of your setting, of your context as well.
Of where you're putting your attention. And that's really hard because we're so used to it and we keep thinking, oh, that's my reality. Well, it isn't. You made a choice. If you want to keep blaming, you know what I mean? It's like picking at a sore and it just gets deeper and deeper. Well, stop scratching. I'm not saying I live like this. I am as flawed. I'm up most of the night at the end of one Netflix thing and it says, see next episode. I don't even have fingerprints. I'm on it so much. So, we're all suckers.
I remember this line from the book, the Frazzled book, where you said, something about trying to wrestle yourself into being present and mindful, and then just hearing, but you haven't ordered the bath mat, you moron. Just this line of, it's always the trivial.
There's always something to do. Your mind is so good at it. It will convince you that you have to get a pillowcase now from the White Company. Stop meditating and get up there. It is brilliant at telling you the emergencies that you need to attend to. Like, there's a chicken leg in the fridge and I have to eat it now.
Well, Ruby, it has been a delight.
Thank you.
To be present with you and to give you my awareness and my attention. And thank you so much for your time. I hope the Nudgestock audience really take on board what they've heard, that they buy the book for one thing, but or all of your books, and that they look into the Frazzled Cafe, and if there's certainly anyone
they want to get involved, they should
get involved.
Come to
take
me.
That global. Nudgestock 2021 could be the place that happens. So, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Really grateful to have you.
Thank you so much.